Okay, just let's get it moving a little bit. Yeah, so the stillness has to be able to move, and the moving has to be able to stop and become still. So the legs always bent, almost like you're foraging, like a hunter-gatherer. You're inspecting the ground, so you want to be low down so that nothing escapes your attention. Okay, so just consider the lemur, the animal, the primate. It's like a primitive primate that lives in Madagascar. So Sila knows all about lemur because she's got a load in her kibbutz. So you think of when they run along a branch, they're not so much balancing on the branch as gripping it, because their feet are a bit like hands. So this is the feeling that we want. So the foot hits the ground and it grips the ground. It doesn't just rest upon the ground. It's almost like my toes are disappearing into the ground and I'm clenching them a little bit. And just feel how, the same way if you're like climbing a rope, you're straightening and bending the arms all the time. It's the same thing here. You're bending the leg to actually grip the ground and bring your weight into it. Yeah, so the action of the leg pulls you down rather than thrusting you up. This is what we're after. So I'm gripping the ground. I'm what Nitzan calls grabbing the ground, rather than balancing upon it and thrusting up from it. So John used to talk in terms of Neanderthal and then the later Cro-Magnon man that displaced the Neanderthal. So the Neanderthal were of the Ice Age. So they were living in an environment that was devoid of vegetation, just rocky, and they were hunters. So they wanted to be squat so that nothing could see them. Whereas the Cro-Magnon man came from the savannah in Africa, so he was always standing up in order to look over the top of the grass. That's the way he could see whether something was coming in that was dangerous or edible. So we're more like Neanderthal. We're grabbing the ground and pulling ourselves into it. Wow. And as you grab the ground and pull it, you move towards it, but it's as though you're pulling a footful of ground up into your dantian through like the whole perineum. So 1, 2. And just really relish, enjoy the leaning, enjoy the tilt. Yeah. So we don't want our verticality to be a stiffness in the head and the neck. The verticality just comes from the stillness and the heaviness of the sacrum and the coccyx, rather than because I'm stiffening my neck into a vertical. So 1, 2. Okay. And now, just using that action to get yourself into a really secure riding horse. So just leaning over a little bit and then just put the toes down and extend them. And it's like you you rummage. Yeah. So you're sort of turning a bit in order to really grab it. And it's that brings the arm in. And then here, you just catch the ground like you're holding on to something, and then swing in here. So now your feet are really secure in their places. And you're pulling yourself down into your posture. It's not just allowing gravity to pull you. You're actually a bit more active than that. Okay, so let's just try getting into it again. So just leaning over a bit, and then just toes down, and then just twist a little bit. It's like if you watch them in the sumo, they sort of put their foot down, and then they just twist it on the sand, on the dokkyo, in order to get a grip, and then they pull themselves into it, and then do this one. And then they're actually got a much firmer and deeper connection with the ground. So it's very physical, like a sort of wrestling quality. If you think about a Neanderthal man with the physique, very strong and wide, but quite short. So there'd be great wrestlers. Whereas the Cro-Magnon man, who was slender and tall, like there were Tutsi, like the East Africans, they'd be very good at sort of sending missiles out, at striking. So longer range. So we're very sort of short range. We're sort of grabbing and pulling into ourselves. Okay, so let's try it again. So just leaning over and just put the foot down, just like you're trying to make a hole in the sand by twisting the foot a little bit. And then you draw yourself into it and bring this one up. And then again here, and just down into. So it just requires the ability to be really, control where your weight is. So you're not putting the weight in the foot as it's doing this. You're using more the sort of gripping quality of the toes rather than the weight. And just feel how it just makes you feel like you want to fight, yeah? Like you're capable. Okay, let's try it once more. So just leaning over, put the foot down, really grab the ground, and then draw yourself into it like you're pulling yourself. And just feel how that will release this one. And then you grab here and then pull. You've got to be able to really let the body be heavy and not move it too soon. so that it is the pulling leg that moves it and not the leg you're standing on. Yeah, so when you get it right, you almost feel like you're crouching down. It's much more like John's posture. Okay. And now let's just try just a little bit of this, just for want of something better to do. So just trying to keep that posture and really just using this to mark your breathing. So you're breathing in or out, it doesn't really matter which is which, and then you're doing the other. So this would normally be breathing in and this would normally be breathing out. But when you practice it for a duration, for a long time, it will often switch as it intensifies. So this will become the in-breath, and this will become the expansion, the out-breath. But that doesn't really matter. So feel the outside, and then feel the inside. Just of this space, really. You don't have to think metaphysically. Just outside your arms here, and then inside your arms here. Yeah, so you want the breath and the movement so well integrated that your body feels a bit like a bellows, like the movement of the arms is sucking the air in, and then the movement of the arms is forcing the air out. So you're just this sort of breathing machine. So what we'd like an exercise like this to do, all our breathing exercises really, is integrate the lower back and the belly. So it's almost like just one muscle, and it just alternates from front to back, but it's really just one muscle. So this is the belly pulling, this is the lower back pulling a little bit, the belly pulls back. So they're connected. So as the back pulls, the belly stretches and then it wants to pull. And then as the belly contracts, the back stretches and it wants to pull. Yeah. So one operating forces the other one to come in this alternating sequence. If you don't get this, then you're liable to sort of hurt your back. Your back will just take too much of the strain. You want the belly to be able to take at least half of it. So pulling in the belly, feel the back stretching, and then let the back spring back. And then the belly stretches, feel the belly pulling in against that. Yeah, so it's just physical work. You imagine if you're just a boring laborer, shoveling, digging ditches or shoveling cement or throwing bales of hay or whatever. You know, you'd just be doing these alternating movements all the time. And you'd just naturally coordinate it with the breathing. And pull the back. Yeah, so to get the back and the belly to integrate, it's important that you don't relax either one completely. If you let it go, it's difficult to pick it up again, it takes time. There's a break. Yeah, so here the back is still pulling a little bit and then it will kick in easily. Belly doesn't quite relax, it just stretches. Yeah, so it's basically just becomes the sort of pulling the belly in exercise. They're just the same thing, really. Okay. And now just into. So it's the same action, pulling from the ground. Okay, so let's just try moving from side to side again. Okay, so just feel the joints in the leg. Got those three joints, the ankle, the knee, and the hip. We want them all to sort of break equally, if you like, to allow the body weight to come into the leg. Yeah. So in order to bring the weight into this leg, I pull with the leg. But I don't really want that to be a muscular thing so much as a consequence of the joints breaking. So I break here, that requires me to sink, obviously. The knee breaks, the ankle breaks, and it's that breakage that pulls me across rather than any sort of tugging action. I just break and I move with it. I move into the break. Yeah? This is what's strange and difficult about it. You're breaking and moving into it. And as you move into it, that broken leg becomes strong enough to support your body weight. It's like a miracle. So I just let everything break. So the difficult one really is the hip. This is the one we need to concentrate on. Because we tend, as we pull ourselves forwards, we tend to pull the hip upwards like this. So I really want to break that hip, not just bending it, but bending it this way. So there's like a turn, so a slight turn. So my hip joint, if I visualize the hip joint just being really heavy, then it will sink whatever I do, I'll get a sink out of it. I don't want it to rise up. I just want it to sink. Okay, so I break. Yeah, so in Tai Chi terms, it's just a yield. So the yield is just the straight becoming curved. So it's this straight leg becoming bent. But it's the hip joint we're interested in, at least to start with. Otherwise, you don't sink. So there's a sense that the direction that you're moving in, you're only able to move in that direction because you're broken in the other direction. And that break is causing an attraction, a suck. So you move against that break. So I'm breaking this way, but moving this way. Ooh. And so the joint that you move with is the knee, because the knee will move in the opposite direction of the hip, the breakage of the hip. So the hip is breaking this way, but the knee breaks that way. And so the knee, it's the knee that takes your heart forwards. So, whoo. Whoa. Yeah, so it's just exactly the same as like reaching for the apple on the tree and then bending the arm in order to pull it down. But just imagine that instead of the apple coming off the tree, it pulls you upwards. So it pulls you towards the apple. So I want the leg to, it's that feeling of breaking. That's what's all important. And when you get it right, often you'll feel the mouth filling with saliva. It's like an emotional response that causes you to salivate. They talk about this a lot in the old writings. So you want to produce saliva and then you swallow it. It's meant to be like an elixir. Whoa. So if you remember John, if he used to really like demonstrate something and he'd really get into his energy to demonstrate it, he'd often be swallowing a lot as he was going through the form of the postures. Wow. And I just, woo. So the break pulls me forwards and it turns me towards the foot I'm coming into. So there's a movement from leg to leg and there's a turn. So these are our two motions. Moving from A to B and twisting about an axis. Whoa. And I just break, all these joints break. And it's difficult because this leg has to really take a lot of strain. So I want to stay in this leg as long as I possibly can. And then just let this breaking take me out of it. So, okay, so now let's just come into a narrower stance. And again, just start off riding horse. Again, you can just grab the ground. So you really want this feeling that your feet have purchased on something. They're holding something rather than just settling on a flatness which you rise up from. So the best way to practice that really is to go to sea, go on a boat. So they're just doing that all the time just to keep their balance, get some sea legs. Okay, and now just standing and so one of the consequences of just getting the ground like this is that the ground is the leg is much more attuned to actually receiving the vibrations from the earth. So it's like you're bringing information, you're bringing energy up into your dantian, and your arms are reaching out and receiving energy information from the room. So your body is resonating with both here, the heavens. So the heavens is everything that's basically above the earth. It's not necessarily up there. This is still the heavens. The earth is down here. So my feet are collecting from the earth and my arms are connecting from the heavens. Yeah, so to actually settle down and allow yourself to receive just takes a bit of spirit. You really have to be quite sparky. And if you find yourself thinking to yourself, then you have to have pushed up. If you're pulling yourself down, you can't think. You just feel, you just are. You're just in your being, in your presence. Okay, and now let's just try this. So, so what we want to feel is this, the thing of the balance, the equilibrium, the opposites balancing each other. So when I sink, yeah, then obviously, you know, we're so used to that feeling of just sinking and relaxing. And it tends to be, we tend to overdo it. So we tend to do a bit, sort of, we tend to collapse and push and just use a bit of force, even if it's just a force in the mind. And that's just an indication that there isn't the correct equilibrium there. There isn't a balance. So in other words, we don't have the up sufficiently. Okay, and now let's just try just sinking, but by bringing the knee up. So you're standing on the ground, this feeling of the feet grabbing, which gives you a looseness in the joints. And now just feel your knee and just let the knee, think of yourself being like the puppet, and the puppet man is pulling the string that operates the knee. And that just brings up the knee and moves you gently across and slips you down into the supporting leg and turns you in this direction. And then back up. And then just lifting the knee. And you'll slip round and sink down and turn. So like the three components of yielding, going back, turning, and sinking. So, so that feeling of letting go so that something can just drop, that's the feeling of sinking and relaxing, but it's exactly the same feeling that actually just lifts the knee when I think of this man pulling the string. Okay? So I don't want the knee to come up because I've pushed my heel up. So it's not, we do that exercise, but not here. I really got to visualize this string. So if I just allow the man to pull the string and I just slip down into the other leg. So what we're after is this feeling of the spine lengthening down the leg or down into the heel as this knee is released upwards. And then I've somehow got to get back up without crushing up my sacral area. Okay, now I've just got to really put the mind in this knee and just feel the pull. So something is pulling up. Instantly it starts pulling. I also have to start sinking and relaxing. The sinking and relaxing is almost like a secondary action. The first primary action is the knee wanting to go up. Yeah, and then I can just sit down into the heel. And it's quite difficult because we're not used to letting the spine stretch out. This is what I find when I watch people doing it. They can sort of do it technically, but I don't see their spine stretching. So you just got to really feel like your sacrum is really heavy and it's just pulling down. So the release that allows the knee to go up is also the release that opens a hole underneath the heel of your supporting leg so that this can drop down. And then just back up without crushing this too much. And then somehow I've just got to get this going up. And that will inevitably get a drop and a turn and a movement into this leg. So the knee comes up. Yeah. So this is only possible if all of these joints are just really free and loose. Imagine if that puppet was just really stiff. When the man pulled the knee up, it would just cause a tilt. But if all the joints are really just very, very light and free, and the coccyx is heavy, like the plum on the plumb line, like the pendulum, then whoa. So my knee, I've got to release the knee upwards. This is like the miracle, because normally when we release, something goes down. And so also feel that fourth joint in the leg, which is really the sacroiliac, where this hip bone touches your sacrum. So in a sense, that's just as important as the others. Up here. And then just this knee, I just let the knee come up. It wants to. The knees really want to fly and dance if you've got a light heart. Yeah. So we're sinking and relaxing and becoming humble and small and grovelly, but by allowing something to lift. So and remember the knees, they call the knees of the heart. So what happens to the knee happens to the heart. If the knee is going up, then so is my heart. And yet my body is just sinking and relaxing and almost collapsing into itself. Ooh. Knee going up. And it just hits that equilibrium. So the knee is still going up, it's just reached real slow motion and I'm still sinking down. I just want to stretch that point of equilibrium as long as I can. Ooh, and then just I can cut it off and then here, ooh, the knee coming up. And, ooh. Okay, now let's just go back to riding horse. So again, just catching the ground like a hand, like the same as the way if you're catching a handful of sand on the beach. And you're down and you're under. There's a sense that you've slipped under a low ceiling. Okay, and now let's just bring the feet up. Okay, and now let's just try the heart qigong. So just up. Yeah, so this lift up the front of you and then a drop down through you. So just feel the medium of the air, thick, viscous, difficult to move through. And feel it equally thick as it comes in and out of the lungs, so it's difficult to breathe. It takes so much effort just to pull the air in and then squeeze it out again. Yeah, so we use the breathing to bring continuity to time. So there's no broken places where my mind can slip away because I'm having to bring my mind to bear on the movement because the movement's really quite difficult. Like if you're wading through water, you'd just be conscious of that water all the time because it's difficult. Wow. So remember that time John, he devised because he had all those weights machines in that room at the back downstairs. So he was trying to think of a machine that would develop the correct sort of strength for Tai Chi. And what he came up with was like an all-body wetsuit that was tight, that restricted every single movement, so including the breath. So you had to work doubly hard to do every action. So just imagine that. Imagine you're in a liquid that's got high pressure, or you've got this suit on, and every movement is really quite difficult. So you can't go quickly. Yeah, so the slowness of Tai Chi is a consequence of the work that you're doing, not the work you're not doing. So, okay, now let's just extend it. So bring it into the heart and then just let that explode out. So as you bring the hands up, really straighten the arms. Just enjoy that click as you straighten into complete rigid straightness. And just make sure your sacrum remains dangly. So keep tone in the belly. Yeah, so the muscles are relaxed, but never flaccid. They're always toned. Because if they're not, they can't sing. So, so let this be the last one. So up. So I want this to remain dangly. I don't want it to seize up. And then just back. So let's just stand in attention posture just for a few moments. So just feel the joints, especially in the legs. Yeah, so they could really bend at each joint could really bend at any moment. So just imagine the string puppet. So just let each joint, it'd be worthwhile getting a puppet and just seeing which of the joints have got strings, yeah? So the ankles, the knees, you don't have to worry about the hips. If anything, they're pulling down, not up. Head, elbows, wrists. Yeah. So they're being held up from above, and so you can just really release them. You don't have to worry too much about pushing up from the ground. You'd be amazed just how little strength you actually need in your legs to keep yourself up. Whoa. Yeah, so a lot of the tension that we voluntarily take on board is we do it to give ourselves a sense of a clear head, the sense of just being able to make sense of things with a head that is stationary and sharp, a mind that can sharply distinguish. So in Tai Chi, it's almost like we just induce the opposite state, like a drunken, hazy, washy, woolly, where everything's just sort of slopping back, to and fro, up and down, backwards and forwards. And then you can really feel that hard sort of aggression that we normally hold the world with. It all comes from here. It's from the neck. We know the neck is just tight. So let's just reaching up gently and just out. And again, just the legs sort of loose. So if you weren't held up from above, you'd just buckle and fall. And then just let the head turn. Start off small and gentle. And then just bringing the hands in. And now just looking up and down. Just be careful here that you don't fall over backwards. So just up. Yeah, so the reason we bring that stiffness into the neck and the reason we hold the world in our minds like we do is because we're generally observers rather than participators. Yeah? So we want to physically participate in the space we're in. Yeah? So it's almost like the head is stirring the air a little bit. So it's not something you're just doing for you. And again, it's coming from the action here. So the longer you do it, the more integral it will become to a whole body experience. This is one of the things in Zen at the moment. They talk a lot about embodiment, because the problem with meditating is that you just become a bit disembodied. it tends to be sort of all in the mind. So here, ooh. Like your head is just the end of the whip. Ooh. Okay. And now let's just bring the hands onto the sacroiliacs, so either side of the sacrum, just for a place for them to be, and just rotate the head. So again, it can be as gentle or as vigorous. So when you sort of work on places that are a bit sort of chronically tense, then you find that when the tension releases a bit, you can breathe more deeply. So that chronic tension that you were housing was actually inhibiting the depth of your breath. Yeah, so you can see as the head, it's affecting the chest. Yeah, so here the chest is stretching. Ugh. And then here the chest is really collapsing. And you can do these sitting down, you know, don't need to be standing up. Okay, let's just change direction. So, and then just slowly let it just come back to stillness. Yeah. Never be afraid to vocalize. John said, you know, when Dr. Chi is always making funny noises, and apparently when him and Chairman Ching used to practice together, they'd have a real repertoire. It's like in the old days, you know, you'd go to church and you'd sing your heart out, and you'd leave feeling a damn sight better for it, because you just let your energy out and you just really resonated with your own energy and with the energy of the congregation. It really brought you together, this whole space vibrating and your body vibrating with it. It's really strong. Yeah, so the stillness contains movement. It's always wanting. When it's still, it's wanting to move. And yet what's moving is actually still. So my body itself is still. It just happens to be moving. There's movement as well as the stillness. Yeah. Okay, and now let's just try a little bit of that form. So just putting what we've done to practice to good use. Okay, so the first thing in the form, going from attention posture, where you're 50-50. Yeah, so this is what we're doing, you know, with the sort of looseness in the legs, the willingness of this just to drop down, the willingness of this just to lift up, but without locking it. So we still want this. Yeah. So that it's a body that looks still, but it's so full of movement that you're almost giddy, you're almost drunk with it. Okay, now we want to slip down into a leg. Doesn't really matter which one. But we want to slip into the leg by letting the other knee rise. Yeah? So we stand in the field of gravity, but we're also standing in the field of levity, in this lift to the heavens, this sense of, and it's not the rebound of gravity. If you sink down into a strong leg, then you'll bounce back up again. It's not that. It's something that's there, just a lift, like a scent. John used to say it was like a scent, like a perfume. Okay, so now I just want my knee to connect with that. I just connect the knee with this lift of levity. And I just allow this just to drop down in the leg, and then I can just lift the foot and just step out with it. And now we want to move into the foot but by breaking the joints of this leg until I'm really in that foot. And then I can just let this one come up, and then I can, as gently as I can, straighten up. Just feel how awful that feels. Straightening up is a violent action. It's impossible to do it without that. Okay, so now same thing here. So first of all, just get really loose. Yeah. And then just feel the knee. Imagine the puppet man. So and it's just coming up, and you're just melting down into this leg. Ooh. Your spine is lengthening down, your lower back is stretching out, and then you step. Now, I don't want to move across simply by pulling. I just want to break these joints. Ooh. So it's no effort to move. Okay, so again, just knee connects with the upward. I step. Again, you can catch the ground like with the lemur's foot, it's grabbing something, and then move by letting these joints relax, break, fold. It's folding. That brings you into the leg, and then you can just pop the other leg up, and then somehow, I've got to come up without crunching up my sacrum and my coccyx. Okay, so again, so this knee rises up. It's that release in the lower back that's important and also difficult. Step, and then I just break here. The knee naturally just goes out, and yeah, so what's really difficult is just getting the action to come from a relaxation rather than the tension. When it comes from a relaxation, we tend to not think we've done very much, but that's the whole idea. So this breaking here, breaking at the knee, and you just slide across, but you also go down a level. So you're quite sunk. And again, the knee comes up, this lower back stretches. And when you feel the stretch in the neck, then you know you've got the lower back right, because they're connected. The neck and the lower back do the same thing if you're relatively relaxed. And then here, one, here, and whoa. And my knee. Ooh. I catch the ground, and then I just break these joints. So basically, you sort of make a hole. You make a hole, and then something can rush in, but also you will rush towards the hole as well. Because it's like the hole, you make the hole under the foot that you step with. So here, whoa. And then I step here, and whoa. And then I just fold these joints so that I can embrace that space. And so it's very much like climbing a rope. I remember, when Nitzan gave me that image, this is when he first came to Wimpole Street. He was telling me that, like in Chen style, that you climb up the other person. You're just grabbing each joint and climbing up them. You're sort of clambering along them in order to yield rather than going back and doing this. Very different. Yeah. So knee coming up, this just lengthening down, stepping, and then this is the hand that's reached up the rope, and then I just bend the joints, and that pulls me across, but it also softens and opens me up here. It makes this contained space, this hole, like a hole in the ground that you could fall into. And then again, this is I catch with the toes, and then it's almost like my hands are allied with the knees. Yeah, so my hands go with the knees. But what's important really is these two joints here, that these are sinking as my knees go out. It's pulling my hips down. Yeah. And then just this one, this is really just the heart qigong that we've just done. Yeah, so just lifting that energy in front and channeling it down through yourself. Yeah, so the way John used to describe it was that, this first step in the form is just you making a connection with your world, with the room that you're in, really. So you fill the space, you make a hole for everything to fall into. And then this is just you connecting with the person in front of you. So this is very specific. Yeah. So when you see the masters do it, their arms are quite close together. So it's not this sort of thing. Yeah, it's very specific. And then the elbows drop rather than go out. Yeah, so it's this feeling here. Okay, so again, just one. It drops me down. I step, and then I just melt. I melt into this hole, into this opening. And then, and then we just do the ward off left, basically. So just here, just turning to the side, stepping, and then just embracing that foot. Imagine there's a tree growing out the ground where your foot is, and you come across and embrace it. And then step here. And then the same thing here, you just come across. So you want to delay the weight transfer as long as you possibly can. So it almost looks like you're going to grind to a halt. Yeah. Think of Mac. Yeah, he had the best Tai Chi. Okay, so this gets me lowering down the leg. And then I break. And so it's like a really weird business to me anyway. So it's like here, I'm opening, I'm making that hole. And then I just, again, I want to come through there by bending here. I don't want to just pull with the foot because it will tend to pull me out of this foot and up. So I just fold at the hip and embrace that space. And then the same thing here. So, so let this knee come up. That's really difficult because we're so used to just going down when we sink, of course. To sink by getting something to come up is quite difficult. And then, so you don't need to do that step up. And now I just yield. So 1, 2, and embrace, but by breaking here. So just feel that miracle. Your leg has just broken into pieces, and yet now it's supporting you. Yeah. And then you step, and again, I want this to break. Remember, the breaking of the hip makes this point go backwards, but it also gets you turning. Yeah, so you're turning, staying in this leg as long as I can, and then finally, just coming forwards. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, just get everything in line. And then you're wanting this lift of the knee to get you going down the other leg. So, step, catch with the foot a little bit, and then again, moving across by bending here and bending here. And letting that open you out and expose this opening, which you allow the world to flood into. And then one, and then round here, one, and again folding here, and step, and folding here. Okay, and now let's just, and so remember, like at the intensives, we'd often work on something like this. So John would talk about something, then we'd do a form really concentrating on it. And then finally he would say, okay, now let's just do a form, forget it all, just do your form and just see how much of that starts creeping in by the time you finish. Yeah, so we know the forms so well, we've been doing it so many years. We can doctor it, we can play with it in order to develop certain skills and energies and relaxations that will then come into it, into the body of it. Okay, so as you're standing in riding horse now, just feel the lift of the knees and the fold here. Yeah, so it's like the knees have almost got a life of their own. They're just wanting to drift upwards. And now let's just bring it back to attention. So how do you straighten the legs without ruining it all? That's the conundrum. So all the joints just really loose. Yeah, so it's the ones in the spine that's difficult, really, getting all those vertebrae loose and limber. And you should feel sort of, like you've just had a glass of wine, you're just. Okay, so let's call it a day.